Can't talk right now. I'm in a treatment. My mother's voice was barely a whisper, softer than the hum of the ER monitors that were screaming for attention around me. I was lying on a gurney in Sedona, Arizona, watching my own blood pool on the linoleum floor. The climbing accident had shattered my pelvis and ruptured something deep inside me. The trauma surgeon was shouting about internal bleeding and consent forms. The nurse held the phone to my ear, her face pale. "Mrs. King, your daughter is critical. She needs surgery immediately. We need your verbal consent now." There was a pause on the line, heavy and deliberate. "I can't break my vow of silence," Vanessa whispered. "It would ruin my aura. Call me when the energetic field is clear." Then the line went dead. "Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." The pain wasn't sharp. It was a dull, heavy weight that felt like the entire mountain had followed me down and was now sitting on my chest. But the silence after that call was heavier. I lay there, staring at the fluorescent lights, and realized I wasn't surprised. Not really. My name is Collins, and for 21 years, I've been the anchor dragging down Vanessa's spiritual ascension. That's what she called me once, after a glass of organic wine. An anchor. She preferred the term starseed for herself, or lightworker. Mother was too terrestrial, too heavy. Growing up with Vanessa was like living in a house made of smoke. You could never lean on anything because nothing was solid. We moved every 6 months, chasing new gurus, new vortexes, new vibrations. One month it was breathwork in Bali, the next it was crystal healing in Santa Fe. I raised my little sister, Stormai, in the back seats of rental cars and the corners of ashrams. I learned to cook on a hot plate when I was 8 because Vanessa was fasting for clarity. I learned to balance a checkbook at 12 because Vanessa believed money was just energy that flowed, usually away from us. The gaslighting started early. When I had a fever of 103, she told me it was just my body purging negative thoughts. When I broke my arm falling off a swing set, she refused to take me to a doctor because X-rays disrupted the cellular matrix. She wrapped it in lavender oil and told me to manifest healing. I sat in my room for 3 weeks, biting a pillow to keep from screaming, while the bones set crooked. That was the lesson. Pain wasn't real. Needs weren't real. They were just low vibrations, evidence that I wasn't spiritually evolved enough to transcend my human shell. By the time I got to college, I had perfected the art of being invisible. I chose geology because rocks were real. They were solid. They didn't change their minds or their vibrations. I worked 3 jobs to pay for tuition and the small apartment I shared with Stormai. Vanessa didn't contribute a dime. She spent her alimony checks on retreats that cost $5,000 a weekend, claiming she was investing in our spiritual inheritance. "I'm clearing the ancestral trauma for you," she'd say, packing her designer bag. "You'll thank me when your chakras align." I never thanked her. I just paid the rent. I paid for Stormai's dance classes. I paid for the groceries. I became the parent because Vanessa was too busy being a goddess. And now, lying in this trauma bay, listening to the beep of the machine counting down my fading pulse, I realized the ultimate punchline. I had spent my life protecting her from reality, handling the logistics, the bills, the mess, so she could float above it all. And when reality finally came for me, when I was the one bleeding and broken, she couldn't even be bothered to pick up the phone. She chose her aura over my life. The nurse looked at me, tears in her eyes. "We need a next of kin. Is there anyone else?" Closed my eyes. There was no one. Just the silence and the cold, and the absolute certainty that I was going to die alone because my mother was busy manifesting peace. Then the doors burst open. The sound was loud, violent, and completely unspiritual. Sounded like safety. I forced my eyes open. Standing there, filling the frame of the trauma bay door, was a man in a flannel shirt and turnout gear that smelled like smoke and pine. He looked like he had run through a wall to get here. Uncle Derek. Vanessa's estranged brother. The one she had cut off 10 years ago because his blue-collar energy was toxic. The one she said was asleep because he worked a 9 to 5 as a fire chief and didn't believe in Mercury retrograde. He didn't look asleep now. He looked terrifyingly awake. He strode across the room, ignoring the nurses who tried to stop him, his boots squeaking on the bloody floor. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Panic. Real human panic. Not for his vibe, but for me. "I'm here, kid," he said, his voice rough like gravel. "I'm here." He turned to the surgeon. "I'm her uncle. Her mother is incompetent. Give me the damn pen." He signed the forms with a force that nearly tore the paper. He didn't ask about chakras. He didn't ask if the surgery aligned with my astrological chart. He just asked if I was going to live. "Do whatever you have to do," he told the doctor. "Save her." Then he grabbed my hand. His palm was calloused and rough, stained with soot. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever felt. It was solid. It was real. As the anesthesia mask came down over my face, the world started to blur. But I held on to that hand. I thought about all the times I had seen him from a distance over the years. The birthday cards that arrived with no return address because Vanessa would throw them out if she knew. The times he'd park his truck down the street just to watch us walk to school, making sure we were okay. He had been there. He had always been there, hovering on the perimeter of Vanessa's force field, waiting for a breach. Waiting for this moment. Family isn't a vibe. It isn't a bloodline. It's the person who drives 2 hours in 90 minutes because they heard you were hurt. It's the person who isn't afraid of your blood or your pain. It's the person who shows up when the crystals fail. As the darkness took me, I realized something that made the fear recede just a little. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. I just had the wrong parent in the room. Waking up felt like swimming through concrete. My eyelids were heavy, glued shut by sleep and exhaustion, and my throat felt like I'd swallowed a handful of desert sand. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only thing tethering me to reality. I forced my eyes open, blinking against the harsh fluorescent glare of the recovery room. The first thing I saw wasn't a doctor. It wasn't a nurse. It was a pair of dirty, soot-stained boots propped up on the edge of the bed frame. I shifted my gaze upward. Uncle Derek was asleep in the vinyl recliner, his head lolled back at an uncomfortable angle, his mouth slightly open. He was still wearing his turnout gear, though he'd taken off the heavy jacket. He looked exhausted, unshaven, and completely out of place in this sterile white world. He looked like the best thing I had ever seen. I tried to say his name, but it came out as a dry croak. He snorted awake instantly, his eyes snapping open, scanning the room for a threat before landing on me. "Hey," he said, his voice rough. He sat up, rubbing his face with a massive hand. "You made it. Doc said it was messy, but they put you back together." "Water," I rasped. He was up in a second, holding a plastic cup with a bendy straw to my lips. I drank greedily, the cool liquid soothing the fire in my throat. "Thanks," I whispered. Where is she?" Derek's face hardened. The relief vanished, replaced by a cold, stony anger. He didn't have to ask who I meant. "She hasn't called, Collins." "Not once." He nodded. It was what I expected, but it still felt like a physical blow. "Phone," I said. "I need my phone." "You should rest," Derek said, but he didn't fight me. He reached into the plastic bag of my personal effects on the bedside table and handed me my cracked iPhone. The screen lit up. No missed calls. No texts from Mom. No texts from Stormy. But there was a notification from Instagram. "Vanessa Vortex is live. Emergency healing circle for my daughter." My stomach dropped. I tapped the notification. The screen filled with my mother's face. She wasn't in a hospital waiting room. She wasn't in a car rushing to see me. She was sitting cross-legged on a yoga mat in the center of a candlelit circle at the retreat. She was wearing white linen, her hair perfectly tousled, her face arranged in a mask of tragic, brave suffering. She looked beautiful. She looked like a saint. "My friends," Vanessa whispered into the camera, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "I am breaking my vow of silence because the universe has sent a test. My daughter. My precious Collins. She is transitioning through a dark night of the soul right now. Her physical vessel has been damaged. She wiped a single perfect tear from her cheek. She didn't mention that she had refused to sign the consent forms. She didn't mention that she was 2 hours away. I can feel her pain in my own womb, Vanessa continued, closing her eyes and pressing a hand to her chest. I am holding space for her here, in the vortex, because my energy is too powerful to be contained by a hospital. I need you all to send light. And if you feel called, please support our spiritual warfare. The link is pinned below. I looked at the bottom of the screen. There was a pinned comment from Stormy. Donation link in bio. Send angels for Collins. Stormy was moderating the chat. My 18-year-old sister, who I had raised, who I had protected from Vanessa's worst impulses, was blocking people who asked why they weren't at the hospital and pinning the Venmo link. They were monetizing my near-death experience. I watched the viewer count tick up. 500, 800, 1,000. The comments were a river of prayer hand emojis and hearts. Sending love, Vanessa. You're such a strong mother. Donated $50. Keep shining your light. They were paying her. They were paying her for my pain. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something inside me snap, clean and sharp like a dry twig. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. For years, I had told myself that Vanessa loved me in her own broken, selfish way. I had told myself she was just eccentric, just damaged. But this wasn't damage. This was a business model. I wasn't her daughter. I was content. I was a plot point in her hero's journey, a tragedy she could leverage for engagement and donations. She hadn't come to the hospital not because of her aura, but because the hospital was a stage where she wasn't the star. Here on her live stream she was the main character. I was just the prop. I looked up at Derek. He was watching me. His jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. He had seen the screen. She's raising money, I said, my voice steady. For my spiritual support. She's a predator, Derek said. She's a parasite. Yeah, I said. I looked back at the screen, at my mother's radiant, lying face. I took a screenshot. Then another. I recorded the screen as she asked for more money, specifically citing medical expenses that I knew she would never pay. Derek. Yeah, kid. You said you knew a lawyer. Do. Best shark in Phoenix. Call him, I said. I want to sue her. Derek smiled, and it was a terrifying, beautiful thing. Consider it done. The lawyer arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like an accountant who enjoyed firing people. His name was Vance, and he wore a suit that cost more than my tuition. He didn't offer sympathy. He opened his briefcase on the rolling table over my bed and laid out the paperwork with the precision of a surgeon. Emergency petition for temporary guardianship, Vance said, tapping the first document. Given your condition and your mother's documented refusal to act, a judge will grant this within the hour. It gives Derek medical and legal decision-making power. Sign here. Sign. My hand was shaky, but my resolve wasn't. It didn't feel like betraying my mother. It felt like cutting off a gangrenous limb to save the rest of the body. Next, Vance said, sliding a second stack of papers forward. Civil suit for medical negligence, emotional distress, and intentional infliction of harm. We are also filing a temporary restraining order to prevent her from contacting you or using your name or image for financial gain. This stops the live stream. Sign, Derek said from the corner. He was pacing, his phone in his hand, waiting. I signed again. She won't care about the restraining order, I said, my voice flat. She thinks laws are just suggestions from the Matrix. She'll care about this, Vance said. He pulled a tablet out of his bag. Derek asked me to run a preliminary asset check. We needed to know if she had the liquidity to pay the medical bills we're suing her for. She doesn't. Her personal accounts are overdrawn. But I found something else. He tapped the screen and turned it toward me. It was a bank statement for a custodial account. The trust fund my biological father had left me when he died. It was supposed to be for my education, Accessible only when I turned 25 or for qualified educational expenses. There had been $150,000 in there last week. Current balance, $0. I stared at the numbers. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. It was like looking at a corpse. That money was my escape route. It was my geology degree. It was my future. Look at the transaction history, Vance said, his tone devoid of pity. I scrolled down. 3 days ago, the day before my accident, there was a single wire transfer. Going. $150,000. Recipient. Vortex Alignment Sanctuary, LLC. She didn't just refuse to pay for your surgery, Vance said, connecting the dots with lethal calm. She stole your college fund to pay for her retreat. That's why she couldn't leave. She had just bought her way into the inner circle with your money. The silence in the room was absolute. The beeping of the monitor seemed to slow down, sinking with a cold, hard realization settling in my chest. This wasn't just narcissism. This wasn't just bad parenting. This was a felony. She forged my signature, I said. The words tasted like ash. She had to. I'm the only one with access. Vance didn't sugarcoat it. Wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, embezzlement. In Arizona, a Class 2 felony meant real prison. I looked at Uncle Derek by the window and said, "Do it." He didn't ask if I was sure. He saw it in my eyes. A daughter no longer, a victim pressing charges. He called a lieutenant from memory. Squad car at the Vortex Sanctuary. Bring the warrant. From my hospital bed I watched Stormye's livestream turn from healing circle to true crime feed. The sanctuary was lilies, linen, and a gong humming through expensive calm. My mother, Vanessa, lay curled on the floor, eyes shut, sure the retreat could shield her. Sirens shattered the spell. Derek strode in with Arizona State Troopers, boots loud on polished concrete. "Vanessa King," he boomed. She sat up, irritated more than afraid. "You're disturbing the frequency," she whispered. Derek's reply was ice. "Your world is about to get smaller." The trooper read the warrant. Wire fraud, embezzlement, felony child endangerment. The room gasped. Vanessa smoothed her robes and tried to sell a story. "Guru Dave, tell them this is a spiritual attack." But the guru stepped back. "We don't allow legal entanglements here. You should go." That was the crack. She wasn't scared of prison. She was scared of exposure. The charges didn't just name crimes. They named her emptiness. The women around her recoiled like customers spotting a scam. She shrieked as cuffs snapped shut. "I paid in full. My aura is gold." Then she lunged at the camera. "Stormye, tell them I'm a healer." Stormye said nothing, just zoomed closer. Vanessa had taught her that everything was content. Now she was the content. They dragged her into the hard sunlight, and the stream died. In my room the quiet felt clean. 6 months later I live in a small A-frame near Thunder Mountain. Derek chops wood outside, steady and ordinary, teaching me to split logs when my anger needs a place to go. I'm finishing my geology degree online, studying things that survive pressure and time. Vance clawed back what was left of my trust fund, enough for school and a life that's mine. Vanessa waits for trial in federal detention. Stormye lives with her dad in Ohio. TikTok deleted. At the canyon's edge, I finally understand. I wasn't empty. I was unanchored. Cutting ties isn't always tragedy. Sometimes it's surgery. The rocks don't manifest. They just are. For the first time, so am I.